Hey guys, here's another lesson for you in AP Gov. Today we're going to tackle campaign finance laws. Basically, this flow chart is going to explain everything that we need about campaign finance. There are basically two laws that you're going to have to know, two Supreme Court cases that you're going to need to know, and two series of loopholes that you're going to need to know. And you can kind of take notes on this with the worksheet that I have attached on the Google Classroom to this presentation. And it should flow pretty well. If you need to, on a separate sheet of paper, if you wanted to just copy this down, you could do that as well. But I'm pretty sure that the worksheet will go hand in hand. So let's go ahead and start with the first law that's on here. The Federal Election Campaign Act, otherwise known as FECA. You can see that it was passed in 2 years, 71 and then updated in 74. We're going to focus on the 74 one. FECA does 5 things. Number 1, it limits candidate expenditures, or basically what they could spend on their run for the president or Senate or House. And basically this said that if you're running for president, you can only spend X amount of dollars. And I'm not sure what that X was in the law. I'll have to look that up. But just know that the first thing it did was it limited what candidates could spend total for their presidential campaign. Number 2, it limited direct individual donations. So if I wanted to give money to Donald Trump or Joe Biden, I would be limited by this law to only give $1,000. Now, that's $1,000 for the primaries or $1,000 for the general election. So I could give both. So when Joe Biden was running against Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg, I could give him $1,000. And now that he's more or less the nominee, once he becomes officially the nominee, then I can give him another $1,000 to run against Donald Trump. And so that is what the direct individual donation limit was. Number 3, it also limited direct donations from interest groups. That number was $5,000. So the NRA, for example, can only give $5,000 per donation. But they could give to all 53 Republican senators. You can give as many donations as you want to different politicians, but for any single politician, it's only $5,000. Number 4, it set up public disclosure rules, and you have to publicly disclose who your donors are for every contribution of $200 or more. And so if I give Joe Biden $1,000, Joe Biden is required to publicly disclose that Jeff Chazen of St. Louis, Missouri gave him $1,000. If I give a donation of less than $200, then it's up to the Joe Biden or Donald Trump campaign whether or not they're going to publicly disclose or not. But if it's over $200, they are legally obligated to disclose. And number 5, it established a new part of the bureaucracy, which we'll be going over tomorrow, the bureaucracy, and that is the Federal Election Commission, or otherwise known as the FEC. And you need to know that the FEC is an independent regulatory agency, and its job is strictly to enforce the laws of FECA and any other campaign law that's out there by Congress. The FEC was created in FECA to basically enforce all 5 or all 4 of the parts that we just went over. And they still do that today. Okay? So that's a brief nutshell of what FECA did. Now, go to number 2 and 3. Those limits that are placed on individuals and interest groups is otherwise known as hard money. It's known as hard money because they have hard limits to how much people can contribute. For instance, number 2, it's $1,000, or for interest groups, it's $5,000. Those limits are hard, therefore it's called hard money. if an interest group wants to donate money to a candidate, they first have to do that by setting up what is called a political action committee, otherwise known as a PAC. And so a PAC is basically an organization set up by interest groups. They have to register with the FEC, and what they do is they raise money from people in order to donate to political candidates. And how much is that political donation worth? It can be upwards of $5,000. But if an interest group wants to donate money, they have to form a PAC first, and then that PAC would donate the money to however many politicians they want. Okay? So that's some other just extra vocabulary that you'll need to know. Once they passed FECA, you knew that somebody was going to try and say that one or all of these regulations are unconstitutional. And that leads us to our first Supreme Court case, Buckley versus Valeo. And so they were trying to say that number 1, number 2, and number 3 were unconstitutional. And so the outcome of this was that, number 1, money is now considered free speech by the Supreme Court. They basically say that giving money is the same thing as making a speech in favor of the candidate that you're giving money to. And so therefore, giving money is a First Amendment right. Therefore, let's skip down to the unconstitutional part. They ruled that number 1, the limiting candidate expenditures, was unconstitutional. You cannot tell a candidate how much to spend, or really what it also meant was that you couldn't tell a candidate that they could only donate a certain amount of money to themselves. So if I was a multi-billionaire and I wanted to write myself a check for $100 million, according to FECA, that would be illegal, and the Supreme Court said that is unconstitutional, that it's your money and you can support yourself. And so basically they rule that number 1 unconstitutional, and to this day candidates can spend however much they want on their presidential elections. But they did affirm number 2 and number 3. The Supreme Court said that number 2 and number 3 are constitutional, that you can limit outside donations, that is okay because it tries to level the playing field and makes politics as equal as possible. So those 2 things were ruled constitutional. Number 1 was ruled unconstitutional. And so that's the gist of Buckley versus Valeo. Now, as soon as they ruled that number 2 and number 3 were constitutional, then people started looking at the law and tried to figure out a way to get around those donation limits. And that created our first loophole called soft money. So basically what people would do to try to get around the individual donation limit was to basically donate money to the state party. So let's say I want to support Donald Trump, but I don't want to just give him $1,000. I want to write a more sizable check that will help him out. So what I would do is I would write, let's say, a $50,000 check to the Missouri Republican Party. The Missouri Republican Party doesn't have any limits right now in the state of Missouri as how much you can donate, so you can donate as much money to the Republican Party of Missouri as you want. From there, they would take that money and funnel it to the National Republican Party, and the National Republican Party would use that $50,000 to do something to help Donald Trump, like get out the vote drive, where they would try to register Republican voters, or other things that in a roundabout way would help Donald Trump or Joe Biden become president of the United States. And it's called soft money because there is no limit to it, and it's indirect. So because it's indirect and it has no limit, you could literally donate millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars to candidates. And so over the years, people started funneling more and more money into the soft money donations and getting around the FICA limitations. So now fast forward to 2002, a senator from Arizona named John McCain, a Republican, and a Democrat by the name of Russ Feingold from Wisconsin decide that they need to update FICA and make it more modern. And so they develop what is called the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, otherwise known as the BCRA. And this is the second law that you're going to need to know. It was done in 2002, and it basically does three things. Number one, it raises those limits from FICA for individuals from $1,000 to $2,000, and then makes that $2,000 go up $100 a year ever since. And so now, or every other year. So now in 2020, instead of donating $2,000, you can now donate $2,800 or $2,900. I forgot which one it is, but $2,800 or $2,900 to Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And then in the next cycle, 2022, that'll go up another $100 or so. So that was number one. Number two, and probably the biggest thing, is it now shuts off and prohibits soft money. So it makes that indirect donation through the state parties totally illegal. That if you donate to the state parties have to use it. They can't funnel it up to the national party and let them use it. So it prohibits and shuts down that loophole. And then the third thing that it does, and this is something else that was a loophole, what other interest groups were doing was, in order to get around that $5,000 donation limit, what interest groups would do is they would create commercials called issue ads. An issue ad was a commercial that was obviously in favor of a candidate, but you didn't use the magic words like vote for or elect or select or choose. You basically made an issue ad that was obviously helpful for one candidate. So for instance, if I wanted to make an issue ad for Donald Trump on abortion, what I would do is I would say something to the effect of, do you want to keep babies safe for their entire lives? And then I would show a face of Donald Trump. Or do you want to kill babies before birth? And then I would show a picture of Joe Biden. And I would just keep going back and forth, and I'm not using any of the magic words, but I'm obviously making a pro-Trump, anti-Biden issue ad. So what interest groups would do is would pay millions of dollars to make these ads and to put these ads up in big cities like New York, Chicago, LA, where it costs millions of dollars to put these on the air. Well, the BCRA started to slap limitations on when you could throw up those campaign issue ads. And the easiest way that you can tell whether a commercial is an issue ad or not is if you hear at the very beginning or the very end, I'm so-and-so and I approve this message. If you hear that, that is a campaign ad. That is not an issue ad. If you see a commercial that attacks and seems to be over an issue, and you don't ever hear the candidate say, I support this message at the beginning or end, then you are watching an issue ad. And so the BCRA slapped a whole bunch of regulations on those issue ads, which then leads to a new Supreme Court case. And that is Citizens United. One of the other things that happened much earlier on, basically in the Teddy Roosevelt administration, was that unions and corporations were not allowed to donate money to candidates, that we weren't going to let businesses use their vast profits to try to buy politicians. In Citizens United, you have a corporation or an interest group named Citizens United who makes an anti-Hillary Clinton documentary. And it's basically this documentary that just goes off on Hillary Clinton. And it happens to be done right before the 2008 primaries, where she looks like she's going to be the nominee and not this unknown senator named Barack Obama. And so Citizens United puts out this documentary to start the attack on Hillary Clinton. Well, it was close enough to the primaries and caucuses where Hillary Clinton thought it looked a lot like an issue ad and therefore has to be subject to the BCRA regulations. And so it goes all the way to the Supreme Court about whether or not this is a documentary or an issue ad. And if it's a documentary, then it doesn't have to follow the BCRA. If it is an issue ad, then it does have to. And basically what ends up happening is the Supreme Court rules in Citizens United versus the FEC that money is still considered speech, and that the ban on corporations and the limitations placed on corporations is unconstitutional. And it basically says that corporations, because they have rights as well, including First Amendment rights, they cannot be limited in what they can and cannot say and do. And so now, instead of being told that they can't spend any money, they are now allowed to spend unlimited amounts of money as long as they do it through issue ads. And that's the huge outcome of Citizens United, is that it allows corporations and unions to now use unlimited amounts of money in elections. And so because of that, we have our last set of loopholes, which are known as super PACs, 527 organizations, and 501c organizations. Super PACs are just like regular PACs, except they don't have to disclose how much money they're spending, and they can spend as much money as they want as long as they just spend it on issue ads. So that they are different from regular PACs in that regular PACs can donate money directly to candidates. Super PACs cannot. They must only donate through issue ads. They still have to register with the FEC, but they have a lot less regulation on them because the only thing that they can do is offer up issue ads. And they do so big time in the 2004 election. They were very instrumental in what they did there. 527 organizations are also organizations that can spend unlimited amounts of money as long as they only create issue ads, and they are not regulated by the FEC because they are actually a tax organization. So they are regulated by the IRS, and the IRS really doesn't do much as far as regulation goes. So 527s can do a whole lot as well. And then the third group, the third loophole group, is the 501cs, and these are the real dangerous ones. Because of how they are set up, they do not have to disclose how much money they've raised, they don't have to disclose who's giving them money, and they don't have to disclose how much money they're spending on issue ads. So everything that they do is secret and in the dark, and that is why we call 501c organizations dark money, because we have literally no idea who's donating, how much people are donating to it, nor how much they are spending. So they are really secret organizations. And those three organizations, Super PACs, 527s, and 501cs, are totally driving our system today. And so that's why you have all of these calls from people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren to get corporation money out of politics, and it's basically being done by not only because of Citizens United, but because of the Super PACs, 527s, and 501cs. So that's a little bit about campaign finance. We went over the two laws, FECA and the BCRA. We went over two Supreme Court cases, Buckley versus Vallejo and Citizens United. Citizens United is the one you're going to need to know for the AP exam. And then you have the two series of loopholes. Loophole number one, soft money. That was the way to get around FECA. And then the way to get around the BCRA was through Super PACs, 527s, and 501cs. I hope you got everything down, and if you have any questions, definitely contact me when I have office hours online and ask all the questions you want. Can't wait to see you soon. Bye-bye.